Hi, welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Jill Pillagallerani, the Director of Learner Support Services, and I'll be facilitating this meet and greet question and answer session. I would like to introduce the finalists for our middle school position, Mary Cotillo. Mary did participate in an interview with our search committee, which was composed of teachers, administrators, parents, school committee, and the team was impressed with Mary's background and found she possessed many of the qualities we're looking for in a candidate to fill our principal position. And as a result, she was moved forward in the process. As a part of our process, we did schedule a time for a meet and greet and question and answer session with our middle school faculty and staff, which actually took place earlier today, and now a virtual meet and greet and question and answer for our families and students to provide everyone with an opportunity to meet Mary and provide any feedback or impressions that they may have. So we definitely welcome your input, and we'd like you to be able to provide any feedback. If you have that after our meet and greet and question and answer today, please feel free to email me. It's at jpillagallerani@bmrsd.net, and I do have my name up there on the screen. It's a little bit of a difficult name to spell, so if you do have any feedback, please feel free to reach out. Before we get started with some questions and answers, I'd like to provide Mary with an opportunity to tell us a little bit about herself, her experience, and why she would like to be our middle school principal. Mary.
Hi, my name is Mary Cotillo. This year will be my 21st year in education, and all of that time has been spent at the middle level. My career began as a 7th and 8th grade ELA teacher in Franklin. After 14 years of doing that, I made the switch to administration, first as an assistant principal in Franklin, and then as an assistant principal where I am in Mansfield now. I love middle school. I am a middle school person on purpose. I think middle school people are super special. I love middle school students. I love everything about being in middle school. And it was only just recently that I decided that I was ready to take on the challenge of running a building and being a principal, and started looking around at communities that might be looking for a new leader. And when I found Blackstone was hiring, I went to the Hartnett Middle School website and looked at the pictures of the kids. So on the website are the Students of the Month pictures. And the first thing I thought was, I know those kids. You know, it's kind of it's not kind of a big leap. It is a big leap to go from assistant principal to principal. And so I was feeling a little anxious about that. And to look at those kids was just, all right, I can do this. I know these kids. So that was the first thing that felt like, okay, this is the right move for me, was just seeing the pictures on the middle school website. I was like, these are my people. And then going through this process, I have been consistently impressed with the dedication that I see from the staff who are giving up their time in the summer to participate in the search process, the thoughtfulness of the questions that they're asking. It really tells you a lot about what a community values. And I find that all along the way, I have felt really, really good. Like to use a word that the kids use, the vibe is right. And so that's why I'm here. Right place, right time. I am really excited about the possibility of coming to work at the Hartnett Middle School. A little bit about me as a parent. I do have 2 children. I have successfully parented both of them through middle school. We did all survive. My daughter is 20. She is a student at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, and she is studying right now with the ultimate goal of becoming a geriatric occupational therapist. She's very clear that she does not want to be a teacher like her mother and her aunt and her grandmother and her great aunts. It does sort of run in the blood in my family. But she does want to go into a service profession, and she loves geriatrics. She's working as a home health aide right now at retirement community and absolutely loves her residents and comes home with fabulous stories. And so she's working towards becoming an OT. My son is 15 and as different from my daughter as you can get. He had a more challenge. So my daughter loved middle school. Middle school was great for her. She was in her element. She had friends. She played soccer. She was student council, drama club, everything. Like she was that kid. My son, not so much. Middle school was not his thing. Lots of time spent in the office, lots of time spent. I got lots of phone calls from the assistant principal. So I've been down that path too. Please know if you ever get a call from me, there is no judgment behind it because I've been on the receiving end. He did make it through with the help of a fantastic school community. I know how important it is to have that communication all the way around. You know, you've got the counselors, the teachers, the administrators, the parents, the kids, everybody really working together. And he did successfully make it out of middle school. He is now at Tri-County Vocational Regional Technical School, where he is studying carpentry and loving it. And I am pleased to say he is a pleasant, wonderful human being now. We did get to that point. So that's my professional world. That's my mom hat. There's not a whole lot that exists outside of the professional world in the mom hat, but when I do have any free time, I am one half of what's called the Crazy Reading Ladies. You can literally Google search Crazy Reading Ladies and you'll find us. And my best friend, Erin, and I run a literacy nonprofit advocacy where we do professional development around predominantly middle school students and literacy and social emotional learning. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
And Mary, you've spent 6.5 years, am I correct, as a
Yes. Yep. So 3.5 of those were at Horace Mann Middle School in Franklin. That is also where I happened to be teaching at the time. Midway through the year, they needed an assistant principal, and I was just wrapping up the hours associated with my administrative master's program. So I applied, and that first half year, so that half came from that year, and then 3 years after that, and then I did 3 years at Qualters Middle School in Mansfield. Horace Mann is roughly the same size as Hartnett, around 400 kids. Mansfield Qualters is around 800 students, so almost double the size. And I took on some additional responsibilities at Qualters. I coordinated all of the middle school 504 plans and run the new teacher academy for all new staff, pre-K through 12 for the district.
Okay, I'll be looking for any questions that come in, but Mary, I wonder if you could start while we're waiting for them to come in to, you'd be coming into, a new building with new staff and new families. So how would you go about learning? Do you know what I mean about art?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing you have to do is, so there's a lot of things to learn. And I've started some of that learning already by going onto the district website and reading things like the school improvement plan and familiarizing myself with all of the stuff that takes up space that is probably not on the family members' radar. In terms of getting to know families and students, I think one of the things that would be important, well, for families anyway, would be hosting some opportunities to come in and meet in person, like, coffee with the principal type of things in the mornings or evenings to accommodate working families, just to be able to get to hear from families themselves, what have been their experiences at the middle school, what has worked, what hasn't, what are they hoping to see, what are they hoping will continue. So much of school is rooted in tradition and things that the community has come to expect from their school. And I want to learn and understand those and respect those, while at the same time identifying any areas for growth. So that, I think, the way to meet with parents is to make yourself available when parents are available. So that would have to happen. And then with the students, I have access to them all of the time. one of the things that I have heard would be, we'll see how the kids feel about this. I'll float this with some of the kids, but maybe inviting certain groups of kids to have lunch with me, and being able to have some conversations with them. I don't know that that's going to happen right away. I think they're going to need to build a little bit of familiarity first, but that would involve, standing outside the school in the morning and greeting students as they walk in with a smile, being in the cafeteria while they're eating lunch, being in the hallways when they're transitioning, having them used to seeing me in the classroom, coming around and visiting, and being a familiar figure, someone that they know my name and they feel like they can talk to me. And then once I've done that, you can start talking to kids and understanding their experiences. Of course, there are always the students who are sent to the office. And that's an opportunity too, because just because they were sent to the office doesn't mean that their opinions are not valid. So we need to be listening to them as well. So I think a lot of listening in the beginning, not a lot of talking, but a lot of listening to help me build the picture of what has come before me, understand the expectations, both written and not, and finding out what traditions are important to the community, what do they value, and finding ways to continue the things that need continuing and change the things that need changing.
And Mary, right off that last response, a question did come in. You mentioned traditions. It said, someone asked, are there traditions you'd like to bring to the school and district?
One of the traditions from Horace Mann Middle School that I really, really love are opportunities for the school to get together in one place. And the only reason I even realized that it was a tradition I appreciated was when I went to Qualters. Qualters is so big. They don't have a space in the building where all of the student body can come together in one place. And I always felt like, middle schools operate in teams. So I felt like Qualters has a really strong team-based sense of community, but I missed that building-based sense of community. So I would like to find opportunities that make sense. Like, I'm not just going to get the school together for the sake of getting the school together, but there are always opportunities during the course of the year to have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in one place. Some things that I love, any opportunity for the older students to mentor the younger students. So I've worked in buildings, typically that happens in like music, where the 8th grade students will mentor the 6th grade music students who may be just starting an instrument for the first time. Let me think about other traditions. Most of the things that I like to do are literacy based because I am a literacy person at heart. One thing that I started that really was born during COVID, I read the first I would record myself like this. I would sort of set something up like this where one screen, one box would be the text of a book and the other screen would be my face. And I would record myself reading the first chapters of books that I thought middle school students would like. And I shared them out on Google Drive. I called it First Chapter Friday. It was a wonderful way for me to connect with kids. In such a big school, they didn't always, with so many students, it's harder to build those relationships. And so when I started doing First Chapter Fridays, I started noticing kids in the cafeteria kind of doing the double take. Like, did you read that to us? Are you the lady who reads the books? And then we had an in to start having conversations. And it was a wonderful way for me to build relationships with kids. So that is a personal tradition that I fully intend to bring to HeartNet, being able to share wonderful books with kids, but also as an in to start some relationships with kids.
Great. Mary, so you mentioned when you gave in the beginning, just a little summary of your background, you mentioned you've been in education for 21 years. And I know that you've done 6.5 of those years as an assistant principal, but prior to that life, you were in the classroom as a teacher, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So how would those experiences, not only the assistant principal, but the teacher, you know what I mean? How would you bring those experiences along with you as to transition to being a principal? How would all those experiences?
Sure. So there are a lot of things as an administrator that we are told to look for? And well, okay, so let me first start by saying the relationship between teacher and administrator can be incredibly positive and powerful. It can be when there is trust, when there is a sense of community, it can be an incredibly, incredibly empowering, positive relationship. When there isn't that level of trust, or there isn't that sense of community and we're in it together, then the relationship between teacher and principal is really much more like the relationship between an employee and a boss. Where the teacher feels knots in their stomach where they hear the principal walking down the hall. I don't want that kind of relationship because I know what that felt like. I have been in the position of the teachers, and I was a good teacher. My students perform, so not that MCAS data is the be all end all, but 95% of my students were proficient or advanced consistently over the course of my teaching career. I got results, but I never once taught to the test. So I know how to teach. I know how to teach middle school students. So all of those things, I have a big, big bag of tricks. So when I'm talking with teachers, my brain is always thinking up lessons and always thinking up strategies, and you can try this and you can try that, and I can model lessons if they want me to. But I think far more than just the day-to-day, like how to teach a lesson, I can build positive relationships with my staff, supporting them in a way where I'm not the boss there to catch them or to walk into the room and get them. I'm there to be a facilitator of teaching and learning, to be a collaborator, to be a supporter, to help them. If they have a bad day, recognize that, we are all better than our worst days. And sometimes those happen during observations, and boy, that stinks, but don't worry, we're going to try it again and we're going to get through it. And here are some things you can do to improve, and really feel like I know what it feels like to be the teacher on the other end, and to reassure people that I'm in it with them. I'm in it for the long haul. I'm here committed to the community to make the community better, and really sort of bring us all together. I think my years in the classroom are the single most important thing that I can bring to a community, because I know what the staff is living day to day. I lived it for a very long time.
So Mary, we had another question coming in. You did mention about, getting to know the kids. We talked about that in the family while they're in school. But we do have after school activities that take place for our students, whether it's band or athletics. So someone had wrote in, would you attend? And they put occasionally, but I guess to follow up with that, will you be attending those after school events? Like they mentioned band concerts, athletics for our students.
So one of the things that I love going to the music concerts that our students perform in. That's just a general practice for me. Whenever there's an after-school concert, I will be there. If the students participate in MICA, which is like a regional competition, I will go to wherever the MICA concert is, and I will attend MICA. And it's fascinating to me how much that means to the kids when they look out and they see me sitting there, and I'm like, hey, they're like, oh my God. They love that. So, and it's such a simple thing. I have never worked in a district that has middle school level sports. So, my kids went to school in Franklin when I was a teacher and administrator there. So I often saw kids on the sports fields, but that was because I was there for my kids. It was town sports. It wasn't like school sports. So I'm actually looking forward to that. I think that's going to be pretty fun to like put on the gold and purple sweatshirt and the beanie hat and, go with my cowbell. And yeah, I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Great. We had another question that came in that as a principal, how would you create a safe and productive learning environment for all students?
Sure. So safety, let's start with safety. Safety is a big deal. So there's two different kinds. Well, for the sake of simplicity, we have two different kinds of safety. We have psychological safety and we have physical safety. And physical safety is, the number one job of any building administrator. I have been trained in both 4Ls and ALICE, which are sort of like the trainings that schools implement, or the protocols that schools implement in the case of like an intruder. I am very familiar with lockdown drills, fire drills, coaching both staff and students who may be feeling uncomfortable after a national event. So I have every faith in, district administration and police presence, and will follow whatever protocols are in place to the T. And I take the physical safety of the building very, very seriously. So there's that. And that, I think, just comes down to, how do you ensure the physical safety of the building? You do what the police tell you to do. You do what the district policy tells you to do, and you make sure that the people you're working with follow those policies as well. In terms of psychological safety, in schools, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's not just a school thing, but it's something that lots of schools do. So there's like a triangle, right? And so self-actualization is up here, but down here, the foundation of all learning is psychological safety. People need to know that they are safe. And I think some of the ways that you can make students feel safe is they need to be heard. They need to know that they are seen. They need to be acknowledged. They need to know that people would miss them if they were gone. They need to know that they are safe to be themselves. So whether that authentic self is someone who wears a headscarf, or someone who identifies as non-binary, or someone who identifies however a student is going to express their identity, they need to feel safe doing that. And I will absolutely make sure that my students feel safe. So let's take, for example, the idea of a student who's non-binary. I encountered my first non-binary student 5 years ago. First encountered the concept of a gender support plan. And there's a website, genderspectrum.com, that provides lots of resources, and they provide a gender support plan that asks all of the questions that you as an individual may not know to ask, may not think to ask, and it helps guide us through the process of supporting a child and making sure that they are safe. So there are a lot of different ways in which a child could express themselves or want to express themselves, but they don't necessarily feel safe to do. That's where the relationship building comes in. You get to know your students so that they feel safe talking to you. You yourself, as a teacher, as a building leader, model vulnerability. You model how making yourself vulnerable. One of the best ways to model vulnerability with students is to own your mistakes. Apologize when you've made a mistake. I'm so sorry. I assumed that you were, breaking a rule. I didn't realize this was going on. I apologize for speaking to you in that tone. Whatever it is, you own your mistake, you make yourself vulnerable, and then the students feel more comfortable doing that with you. So I think I am my authentic self all the time. I don't really there's really no difference between the Mary who chats with her kids' friends in the living room of her home versus the Mary who is having a conversation with you now versus the Mary who would have a conversation with staff 3 weeks from now. I am my authentic self at all times. And I feel like, I just bit my lip, sorry. And I feel like that encourages others to be their authentic selves with me. And I accept everyone for who they are. I don't judge. And if they need whatever it is that they are looking for, I will do what I can to help them get what they need. And I think ultimately that starts to build that feeling of psychological safety for all students.
And speaking,
I hope that answered the question. If the asker is looking for something more specific, will you let me know, like if you're looking for a particular subgroup, for example?
Yeah, when the questions come through, because they're being sent to me, but off of that same question, we talked about safety, and you talked about that a lot. that you want students to feel safe. So this comes off of students who may feel bullied. So how would you deal with bullying complaints and the family concerns around those bullying issues?
Sure. So bullying, there are state regulations around how schools should be handling bullying. So there should always be a way to report bullying. It's important for folks to know that if the bullying report is anonymous, then discipline cannot be a result from an anonymous report. So if a family is looking for discipline on the other end, they can't make an anonymous report. That's something that I think is important for folks to know up front. Once a bullying report comes in, there are certain protocol that we have to follow. So the first thing is that you meet with and you get a statement from the targeted student. You find out the who, the what, the when, the where, the how. You gather any sort of information you can. These days, most bullying involves some sort of social media. So you ask if there are screenshots, you ask if there are, any sort of evidence. Once you've done that, you start talking to witnesses. And then the last person, according to regulation, the last person you're supposed to talk to is the aggressor. Now, the process can take quite a while. So I will say that I have on occasion gone a little rogue and gone to the aggressor and said, look, I have this allegation. While I'm investigating it, you are to have no contact with, because that I think is the first way to stop whatever it is that's happening. Otherwise, while you're investigating, the alleged behavior could be continuing because the aggressor doesn't necessarily, oftentimes in middle school, things that are perceived by one person as bullying really arise from a lack of social skills. And this person thinks they're being funny and they keep making the same jokes and this person keeps feeling horrible. So you sort of need to give feedback to the aggressor and say, this is being reported. I'm investigating it. This has to stop while I investigate. We call those interim safety measures. Some other interim safety measures that can be put in place are interim safety plans, where you talk to students about avoiding each other, adjusting schedules if necessary, making sure that we have transportation plans in place where kids feel safe. Once you've done an investigation, and if you have a finding of bullying, then you can put an official safety plan in place, not an interim safety plan, but an actual safety plan. I write physical documents that I review with the children and have them sign. And I meet with families to go over findings. Sometimes it's just phone calls, but more often than not, we do have face-to-face meetings. But I think, as long as you follow the protocols that are put in place, if you follow the regulations that the state puts forth, it's difficult to mismanage a bullying report. You have to be committed to the process, and it can take some time, which is why I say we are supposed to go target, witness, aggressor. There are times where I go target, warning to aggressor to stop whatever's happening, and I call it I get away with it because I call it an interim safety measure, and then go on to witnesses, aggressor, and so on. So there are times, I will say, I feel like the word bullying has kind of taken on a life of its own, and things that people think of as bullying don't always meet the technical definition of bullying, in which case, typically how I respond to that is that even if it doesn't meet the technical markers for bullying, even if I'm not labeling this interaction as bullying, I am still going to work on the impact it had on the targeted student. So if a student has a relationship with a peer that they don't feel good about, whether or not my investigation finds that it checks all the boxes to be labeled as bullying, doesn't change the impact it had on the child, doesn't change how that child feels. And we're still going to work with that child, with counselors and with teachers, to help that child feel better.
Thank you. We had another question come in. I'm going to expand on it a little bit, because the question is, what type of growth and improvement do you feel the school needs? And I know, again, you've looked at our website. So my question is, if you're not really sure at this point, how would you go about finding out?
Well, so based on the research that I have done, and so families probably aren't super aware of all the stuff that's available, but I went on the DESE website, so the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and I looked up MCAS test scores and demographics for the school. And I think one area that, and there are there's lots of assessments that a school gives that don't get reported to the state. So MCAS is just one data point. However, it's an important data point, so I don't want to discount it. And I will say that I think the MCAS scores could improve across all grades, across all subjects. So I do think we have some instructional work that needs to be done in order to raise those scores. So that's a lot. Saying it's easy to encapsulate that in one sentence, but that takes a lot of work. In terms of finding out other areas for improvement, that's where I think, if I were to write an entry plan tomorrow for coming to Hartnett, it would involve one-on-one conversations with every staff member. It would mean looking at whatever data exists. So I know Hartnett uses STAR. Is that right? STAR? Am I getting the right? Okay. So STAR reading and STAR math are assessments that are given for students 3 times a year. I would want to be looking at that. I would want to talk to the instructional coach, to the interventionists, to find out what sorts of things, what sorts of patterns, what sorts of trends they're seeing. We should have preliminary MCAS data from the test that kids took last year. I would want to see that. And again, I would want to meet with every single staff member, because not all growth shows up on an assessment. Not all areas of concern show up on an assessment. If there's a feeling that a certain group of students are not being accurately represented, or they're not feeling culturally safe, that's not going to show up on a STAR test or MCAS. It may show up, but it's not going to show up for that reason. So that's where the listening comes in. Lots of questions, lots of listening, and then from that, formulating a plan.
The next question is, how would you as a principal help provide learning opportunities to help create those learning opportunities for all students, including those who may need some extra support and those who are ready to learn beyond and those who excel?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that I have been missing at my current middle school is an intervention block in the schedule. So I don't know, I think I'm trying to remember, in our interview, we talked about how Hartnett does have an intervention block. There's a name for it. Is it a chart, something?
Well, last year it was called, last year there was an intervention block called Charter Time, and I'm not.
Okay. So if there is a time that exists in the schedule, I would look to leverage that time. So if there are students who need I'm not a huge fan of pull-out intervention. If you have a student who's not reading at grade level and you pull them out of English to provide them with remedial instruction in reading, you're pulling them out of English. I would much rather have them stay in the English classroom, get exposed to the content, and do the remedial reading instruction at some other time. So if you have an intervention block, that's a great time to do that. It's a good time for students to get study skills. It's a great time for students to do what I was talking about before, like the mentoring, like the 8th grade teachers mentoring the 6th grade teachers. It also can be an opportunity for some enrichment activities. That gets a little bit trickier because you need to have the advisors, but there are definitely ways where teams can manage their time. So the students who are doing doing a reteach of a social studies lesson go to the social studies teachers. The students who are catching up on some missing assignments go to the English teacher on this day. The students who are doing some mentoring program go here, and the remaining teachers are doing some sort of exploratory or extension activity. I once attempted, I can't say I was successful, but I attempted to do a genius hour. I guess it's something that Google does where they give their staff a certain percentage of their time to work on passion projects. I tried doing that with middle school students. Come to find out, not a whole lot of 13-year-olds really know their passion yet. You know, they all want to like be professional athletes. So, but that kind of project work it takes time, it takes planning. It's not the kind of thing that you can get off and running on day one. But I do think if there is if there's need and buy-in, I think teams absolutely can be flexible at that time to provide the extension activities for the kids who are really looking for a little bit more, and to provide opportunities for reteaching and potential remediation for the students who need some extra time to catch up. And that's already built into the schedule, which is fantastic. If you don't have the time built into the schedule, then you have to get a little bit more creative. You can start looking at after school time. After school time gets a little messy, you know, in case you, from an equity standpoint, if you have students who have to, you know, go home, for example, to take care of younger siblings, or, you know, have to catch a bus at a certain time. Do you have late buses? I didn't think to ask that before now.
We have had late buses in the past.
Okay. So I would, you know, as a building leader, someone who's looking to make sure that things are equitable for all students, my first option, my first goal would be to try and get that intervention block or get that extension block during the school day so that everybody has access to it. But of course, there are opportunities for things to happen after school. And I know that Hartnett has a vibrant after school extracurricular offering, and that's fantastic. But I do think it's important to have things happening during the day so that all students can take advantage of them.
How do you find, we've talked about a lot about safety, the bullying, but how as a principal would you find the balance between addressing the social, emotional, behavioral, and the academic needs of students?
I actually think they're all super, super closely entwined. A student who has some social emotional challenges finds it very difficult to learn. Now, that doesn't mean that every day you go into a classroom, there is like a social emotional activity that students have to take part in. It's really more building instructional practices that have social emotional awareness built into them. So you're going about, as a teacher, you're sticking to your agenda, you are, you know, implementing your lessons, you're facilitating the learning while at the same time monitoring students' social emotional needs and providing social emotional interventions as they are warranted. And social emotional needs often present themselves as behavioral needs. Behavior is communication. So if a child is acting out, it's not ever because they're a bad kid, it's because there's something driving that. So you're looking at behavior as a communication of something. You're trying to sort of peel back the layers to find out what's the issue and then addressing that issue. Sometimes that can be managed in the classroom and sometimes it can't. And that, you know, the child who is communicating their social emotional need through inappropriate behavior has to be referred to the office. But I think it's important to say that the focus of school is always academics. The focus of a counselor, for example, a middle school counselor is not there to be a replacement for an outside therapist. They're there to help a child build the coping skills they need in order to get back into the classroom. So the goal is always, always, always to be in the classroom doing the learning. And the instructional strategies we use are there to help the children build resiliency and help the children work through difficult times while we're monitoring them for signs of other things so that we can provide some different interventions. But it's not like, okay, boys and girls, today we're going to take a break from reading Huck Finn and we're going to do a social emotional lesson. That's not really how I envision things working in middle school.
And talking about the learning styles, you brought that up. One question was, I was scrolling back and I appear to have missed one. It says, do you have experience or knowledge of UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and maximizing individual learning styles?
So I do have some background for UDL. As a teacher, I never really, I mean, I did not write UDL lesson plans for lessons that I created as a teacher. I was exposed to UDL in my master's program for educational leadership, and I was working in Mansfield. We had department heads, and the department heads were doing some work. We had some professional development on universal design for learning in terms of lesson writing. I find that a good lesson has the same elements. I think what makes UDL a little bit different is you start from the end. What is it that you want them to be able to accomplish? And then you work from there, which is something that I think over time as an educator, I just sort of found myself doing without even realize I was doing it. I mean, a UDL lesson is comprehensive, and it has all of these really intricate things. As a teacher, I never really did that for everything I did. But if someone were to ask me after the fact, so what was this, what was that, I could tell them. I do think it's a helpful thing to have in mind. So I have some experience with it, and I have some experience facilitating some professional development. I do think if we're expecting our teachers to develop lessons using UDL, that I think professional development time is warranted, because it is a relatively time-consuming process. Well worth it, though, because it really gets you thinking deeply about what it is you want the kids to learn and how you're going to get them to learn it. So I do think it is worth it. The second part is learning styles. Is that right?
Yes.
So when we talk about learning styles, I'm looking for a little clarification, and I know that's tough in this sort of setting, but are we talking about like visual learning, auditory learning? Is that sort of your take on that?
Because they're saying, how would you be able to support that we as a school are taking into consideration?
Sure. So it's interesting. When I was a classroom teacher, I used to give my kids an inventory. I would take them through this whole questionnaire. They would identify their learning style. At the moment, we graphed it all out, right? And since then, research has shown that there's not a whole lot to back up the theory of different learning styles. It really is a snapshot of where the person is in the moment, which I think is funny, because as I did this as a teacher, I would take the survey with the kids, and some years I was a auditory learner, and some years I was a visual learner, and some years I was like a musical learner, like all these different things. I think ultimately what's important is that teachers are using and differentiated instruction. You look at the kids you have in front of you, and you make sure that the work you do can be differentiated, changed, adjusted for the kids who are at different levels of readiness. Some students are ready to be independent faster than others. How do you fit that in? How are you going to accommodate that? Interest. Some kids are going to be super, super interested in the Call of the Wild, and they're going to want to know all about the gold rush, and they're super into the dogs, and other people are like, this is the worst story I've ever read in my life. How are you going to engage those students? Interest, readiness level, ability. There are some students, especially in middle school, you run into kids, especially, we found anyway in Mansfield, that the pandemic had a real impact on students reading. And we had kids coming into the middle school who were still reading at like a 4th grade level. But then you had others who were coming in who are reading at a 9th grade level. So you have to what kind of technological tools are you going to employ in that sense to make sure that everybody is working on appropriate levels of materials? So to me, when it comes to learning styles, it's all about skillful differentiation. And again, that comes down to knowing your kids. Now, you do have to have the bag of tricks. You do have to know, how am I going to manage my classroom with all of these different needs? And that's where the learning coach comes in. That's where the team comes in, and you talk to your team and they give you ideas. That's where I can come in, and I can say, here's what I did when I was a teacher. But it's a community. We have to lean on one another, especially new teachers, teachers who may be struggling with a particular unit. We have to be able to support each other and be collaborative problem solvers together.
Great. So, Mary, how would you make the middle school a place where kids want to come every day?
Hmm. I think I want our curriculum to be engaging. And again, literacy person, I want to make sure that our kids are reading things that are meaningful, that reflect the world that they live in and open doors to worlds they haven't experienced. I want learning to be fun. I want school to be fun. I want there to be school-wide events. I want there to be spirit days, pajama day. I always used to say, I still say pajama day is one of the best perks of a career in education ever, ever. And everybody who got to work from home during the pandemic, now you know what I'm talking about, because going to school in your pajamas is awesome. So those types of events where you've got like the staff playing the students in basketball, competitions among grades to whatever it is. We need to have community events. So first of all, the number one thing is engaging instruction. So the kids are coming in and they're being cognitively engaged in their learning. It's not, why are you doing this? Because the teacher told me to. Why am I doing this? Oh, well, because I am learning about, civics so that I can do my civics project and be a purposeful member of my community. I want them to care about the learning they're doing. And that's great and all, but kids are kids and kids need to have fun. So how are we going to infuse some of that fun? And so I think, so much joy has been kind of sucked out of education in the past 10 years. I like doing the fun stuff. I want to do the fun stuff. Of course, the priority is always education and learning, but I do think we can make time for student faculty basketball games, and we can have spirit weeks where you get to wear your wacky socks and your crazy hair. And, I think those things are important. And a wonderful way for middle school kids to be kids. With social media the way it is, kids have grown up so fast. No, let's slow down and let you be 12. Let's do crazy hair day and just embrace being 12. Yeah.
So Mary, I know we talked about this earlier today with the staff, had a very similar question regarding cell phones, having cell phones, and someone asked your policy, but more of what are your, feelings about students having phones?
Okay. So my thoughts on cell phones. And my thoughts on cell phones are very, very closely tied to my thoughts on social media. So I'm going to talk about social media for a little bit and cell phones at the same time. I would say trying to think what year it was probably 2017, 2018-ish. I really embraced the idea of using student technology in my classroom. I had 2 personal iPads that I made available to my students. We were not yet one-to-one with Chromebooks. And I was learning all of this. I was getting all of this PD on how to have kids use technology in the classroom, but my students didn't have access to technology. So I let them use their devices. And at that time, I told parents, I told administrators, look, we teach kids how to behave in a classroom, in the hallway, in the cafeteria, in the auditorium, on the bus, in the gym. Every environment has a different set of expectations. Social media is just another environment where we need to provide explicit instruction on behavior. And I believed that, and I provided explicit instruction on building a positive digital footprint, and I gave them opportunities to build a positive digital footprint, right? All of this stuff. I have changed my tune on that. And I think the reason for that is because social media, there's more apps. It's more pervasive. It's more a part of students' lives now. I can remember back in 2016, 2017, there were students who did not have social media accounts, didn't have phones. I don't know that exists anymore. And for the most part, I think most social media apps are developmentally above where our students should be. In fact, in the user agreements for almost I think for every social media app, you have to be 13 to use it, which means most of our kids who have the social media apps are lying. They're signing in and they are not old enough. They're not old enough for TikTok. They're not old enough for Instagram or Discord or whatever it is. Well, maybe not Discord. I don't know that one so much, but they're definitely not old enough for TikTok. That's got a 13 and older disclaimer, and they're using it anyway. And middle schoolers feel emotion deeply. They have big feelings, and they are not prepared for the backlash that comes when those big feelings get put on a global platform. So, all of that to say, I am a proponent of cell phones being put away in school. I think when I was in school, if I had a social conflict with someone, the social conflict existed during the day, and then I went home and I got a break. With social media, kids don't get that break anymore. So let's give them that break during the school day. Let's give them the gift of being able to focus on what's in front of them, on having face-to-face conversations, on removing that distraction. I think cell phones need to be in locked lockers. Now, the biggest concern, I think, and I think most parents understand, that kids need to not be distracted from their work, that they have the technology now in the form of the Chromebook, that they need the break from the social media. I think most parents understand that. The emotional sticking point is, what do I do if I need to get a hold of my kid in an emergency? And I'm a mom, and I get it. And if I got word my son is going to be a sophomore in high school, if I got word that there was a lockdown at my son's school, the first thing I would be doing, despite the fact that they say stay off your phone because you're going to overwhelm the grid and bring it down, the first thing I'd be doing is calling my kid. So I get that. And I think then what needs to happen is education among the parent community for all of the ways in which the school community is trained to keep their children safe. And then we have to ask for a huge leap of faith from our parents to trust in the school teachers and the school community to care for the most precious thing in their world, which is their children. And I know that is hard. I know that is hard. But ultimately, I think the payoff from having the phones put in the lockers during the day is going to be greater than the what ifs and the fears. So that is my unpopular as it may be opinion on cell phones.
Thank you, Mary. I don't see any. Well, I do see one more question. Okay, so I did have another question that came in. It said during the middle school, that's a time when students start thinking on what schools they want to go to.
Mm-hmm.
BVT, Blackstone Valley Technical School, is one of the vocational schools in our area. What would your plan be, or how would you assist a plan to promote the students staying in our district?
Oh, that's a great question. So if a student goes to BVT, they're no longer considered part of Blackstone Millville. And does Blackstone Millville have vocational or technical courses available at their high school?
We have courses. We're not a technical school,
yeah,
but we have different pathways at our high school that are continuing to expand.
So I think that would probably be the most important factor, right? Because, I mean, full disclosure, my son goes to a vocational technical high school. I really value the concept of preparing students. I believe in college and career readiness. And I think that the trades are a viable solution for a lot of kids. So I think it's important to not want to keep kids in district for the sake of keeping kids in district. My goal would be to support the plan that makes the best sense for an individual child. So if our goal is to support children and also keep them in district, then I would want to present to them the options they would have through the district programs that Jill was talking about that would provide them with opportunities outside of a traditional high school experience, and make sure that we're presenting that in equal light with that of a vocational technical school.
I know we're getting close to the end, but we did have another question coming in. It did say, will you bring Alice training to BMR? But we do, and they said, I'm unsure if this is the case, but what we know as parents, it doesn't seem to be. We have trained Alice training.
Okay.
BMR, all of our staff actually across the district is Alice trained. Our high school students have gone through Alice training.
That's great.
We've done tabletop activities. We have had presentations to parents, and we actually did a full drill this year. But if, for Alice, you said you also had that Alice training.
Yeah, I had Alice in Franklin and 4 L's in Mansfield, it's similar to Alice. It's just another protocol. Locate, lock down, leave, live. And it's not sequential. It's in any given situation, you have to choose. Well, you want to locate first, and then you choose lockdown or leave. And live is sort of last case scenario if you find yourself in like a face-to-face situation. But yeah, it's very similar to Alice.
We've done Alice training in the district, and actually, like I said, some tabletop activities across the district as well.
So it sounds like something as a principal I would need to commit to is communicating out that training to the family. And I know you said that has been done, but making sure that the community at large is aware of the ways in which the staff are trained to keep kids safe.
So I don't see any other questions that came in for me. So I just wanted to take the last few minutes, if you had any final thoughts, Mary, or, kind of just to sum this up before we end our discussion tonight.
Well, I have to say, I am feeling just so positive about all of my experiences here so far. I think visiting the middle school today has really been the cherry on top. It's a beautiful building. The staff I met with today were just lovely. And I welcome the feedback from the community, whatever it is, positive or critical. I hope that will be shared with me so I can continue to learn. I consider myself to be a lifelong learner. That said, I am hopeful that today's process yields positive feedback so that I can be the next principal at the middle school. I look forward to working with all of you, and I hope that I have that opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Mary, for being here tonight. And thank you to all of you who have joined in. I do encourage any input or feedback. Please email me. It's J, first initial with Pilla-Gallerani at BMRSD. We definitely appreciate, your thoughts with Mary as our candidate for the principal. And again, thank you all for joining tonight. And Mary, again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate having this opportunity.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.